This is a review of the 2005 Sasquatch Research Conference, which can be found on online. You can find a link to it on SasquatchResearch.net. That's Jason Valendi's website. The link to watch the entire thing online for free is there. But this is my review of the entire conference. The first presentation is by Tom Powell, and essentially it's the same presentation he gave at this summer's Oregon Sasquatch Symposium. A few differences in that there are some things that he talks about as far as he's not trying to prove anything. Well, he's still not trying to prove anything, really, as far as is there a possibility that Sasquatch is doing things on his property? As far as leaving tracks and taking food from his station, his food station, or food stations, I should say. He does have interesting, photographs. Set of photographs. It's, what do you call it? Video. I'm sorry, folks. It's late. I'm kind of tired. Anyway, Tom talks about how there are certain techniques that work, certain techniques that don't in the field. There are things that he'd like to see done, perhaps, that have not been done by some mainstream Sasquatch researchers. I don't think he would be considered a mainstream Sasquatch researcher. Now, some might consider him as such. I think he's one of those that just kind of I think he just kind of flies under the radar myself. That's how I look at it. I think Tom flies under the radar. But he flies just far enough under the radar to kind of be noticed. He flies above the radar a little, but not a whole lot of people really noticed him. Anyway, he gave a great presentation. I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then the next presentation was by Dr. J. Robert Alley, the author of Raincoast Sasquatch, who showed some photographs that were taken in the field of different tree bends and tree breaks. And he does say that some of them are possibly caused by weather, whether by heavy rains or heavy winds or perhaps snowfall. He acknowledges that, but he says that there's some that just don't seem to fit that pattern. There are some that seem to be bent higher up. Of course, again, those can be explained. Some of them can be explained possibly by weather and wind and things like that, but some of them can't be explained by those means. And it was an interesting presentation that he gave. I'd say a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next presentation was by I think Tom Steenberg. Anyway, Tom Steenberg talked about how there's a need for better investigation techniques in the field. He also talked about some of the investigations that he's embarked upon in Alberta and also in British Columbia. And really fascinating presentation. I give it a 4 3/4 out of 5 stars. Um, and then there was a presentation by Christopher L. Murphy, which was really interesting, really fascinating. Almost a 90-minute presentation. Just basically highlighting the things in his then current book, Meet the Sasquatch. Some of the exhibit items that were on his that were part of his Sasquatch exhibit, which was at the one of the museums in the Vancouver Museum back in 2004 to 2005, and then it was brought out in 2006 for the Idaho State University Museum. Of course, that was when they held the Bigfoot Rendezvous out there at the museum there at Idaho State University. And he just kind of he showed photographs of things that were in the exhibit, things that didn't quite make it into the exhibit, but were really fascinating things nonetheless. He just basically goes into the classic stories, the Fred Beck, Albert Ostman, Ruby Creek incident, things of that nature, the Patterson-Gimlin film, his own model that he made of the Patterson-Gimlin film site, or what he thinks is the Patterson-Gimlin film site. As we've seen from the recent videos from Steven Stroifert and Robert and Ian Leiterman, even Chris Murphy's site idea of where the PG film site is may not be accurate. So I give his presentation a 5 out of 5 stars. Really great stuff. And then also there was there were 4 men. There was Andrews, Grover, Goddard, and Smith, and they gave a presentation where they played some of the vocalizations that they have recorded in the field, which I thought was an interesting presentation. Not only that, but they also mentioned, and they had these boulders, which are pretty wide boulders, which they've heard these boulders being clacked together, loud, being loudly clacked together. And they've recorded that as well. They've recorded stick beating and things like that, sticks being beaten together, stuff like that. Interesting stuff. Really fascinating stuff. I give their presentation a 4 3/4 out of 5 stars. Then Matt Crowley gave an interesting presentation where he talked about how casting artifacts might account for some of the supposed dermal ridges, the dermal ridging. Really fascinating stuff. He talked about his own experiments. He's done his own experiments into possible reasonings and reasons why there may be dermal ridges and things like that. I give his presentation a 5 out of 5 stars. And then also, Autumn Williams gave a great presentation on the role of women in the Sasquatch research. And she talked about also how men will react. How men will react in emergency situations over how women react. Women seem to be more rational. Women seem to be calmer. Us guys, we gotta be macho and say, we're gonna take care of it. And I agree with her. We are like that. And women are calm and rational. Us guys, we're gung ho about everything. Anyway, her presentation was great. 5.5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. There was also a presentation by hang on, Al Berry and Ron Moorhead, who talked about the Sierra Sounds. They played some examples from the Sierra Sounds. This was before Scott Nelson came along and began to examine the sounds and listen to the sounds. But they talked about how they went back in the 70s. Alan Berry went to a fellow named Arlen Curlin and had him examine the sounds. And the only thing that Arlen Curlin and his staff could determine is that these recordings were not pre-recorded, were not re-recorded, they weren't sped up, they weren't slowed down. That they were naturally occurring as they happened in the field, in the Sierra Mountains. Their presentation was just it was interesting to have Alan Berry involved in it as well. Alan Berry and Ron Moorhead. I say a 5 out of 5 stars. And then there was also John Kirk gave a really good presentation about CSI techniques. An interesting presentation about CSI, criminal investigation techniques, and how they should apply to the Sasquatch. He's a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and he gave a great presentation. 5 out of 5 stars for him. And then there was Lloyd Pye, who gave an interesting presentation, kind of an extension of his book Everything You Know Is Wrong, where he talked a little bit about intervention theory, which suggested that we are genetically manipulated from the Miocene apes. Miocene apes became the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, the Yeti, and things like that. Lloyd Pye believes they are hominoids, not hominids, and that we are evolved from that. I'd say a 4.5 out of 5 stars for his presentation. Then Lauren Coleman probably had the most controversial presentation, where he talked about sex in the single Sasquatch, where he talked about how it's important to look at diagnostically looking. It's interesting. It's important to look diagnostically at the sex life of the Sasquatch. Certainly that's controversial, but I do happen to agree that it should be looked at, despite the controversial nature of it. I'd say about a 4.5 out of 5 stars for that one. And then finally, Jeff Meldrum rounds it out with his look at the footprints, the Laetoli footprints, the hominid footprints, how they relate to chimpanzees. He looks at that in the context of the Sasquatch footprints, especially the one that was metatarsal break. I think we're all familiar with his talk on that. He's talked about that quite a few times all over the country, at different areas, different conferences and things like that. I'd say 5 out of 5 stars for that. All in all, it's a really great conference. I really enjoyed watching it. I wish I could have been there, but this was 5 years ago. But it was really terrific. I really enjoyed it. The whole set is definitely a 5.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. Good stuff.